The endgame for many people who enjoy ARPGs is the main part of the game that they will spend most of their time in and enjoy the most when they are playing. Today I hope to give a breakdown on how the endgame in Last Epoch works and what you can expect. Of course, this video is going to be filled with spoilers of the story and the endgame. That's kind of the point, so if you don't want those, I'd recommend not watching this video. Just for some context, this Forge Guard is my main character that I've experienced the endgame with so far. He's currently level 93 and is a minion build. Quite tanky but slow at clearing echoes, with solid boss damage. This is my first real character at endgame and currently I have around 150 hours, but quite a lot of this is on low level characters or AFK. So the first thing that's interesting about Last Epoch is you don't actually have to complete the campaign or main story in Last Epoch to access the endgame. You just need access to the End of Times and of course to be strong enough to actually be able to kill monsters in the first monolith. You can also skip a sizable chunk of the story if you want by completing the dungeon Temporal Sanctum, accessible from the Ruined Coast. On completion of this dungeon you will be able to skip to Act 9 of the main story. It is however a level 55 dungeon, so it might be a bit difficult to complete as you should be around level 35 when you enter this area. The only bonus you actually get from completing the main story is you gain +1 all attributes from killing the final boss. Aside from that, you should definitely have all the passive skills and idle expansion slots unlocked from side quests, but you can do those quite early on in the story if you just prioritize them. The core of the endgame in Last Epoch is these monoliths in the End of Time. They consist of many echoes, which are essentially little areas with a dedicated reward, which upon completion grant timeline stability. After you complete the echo, you receive the rewards for that echo, and move on to see the next echoes that are available. These echoes also have modifiers on them, which affect the enemies inside that echo, and they have a duration for a set amount of turns, or echoes, so you can stack them together to increase the difficulty of the echoes that you attempt, but also the rarity of loot and experience received. As the timeline stability increases for that monolith, you unlock certain quest echoes, which are special specific echoes that are always the same and don't really have any special rewards. So, where would you do them? Well, to get to the final quest echo of that monolith, you need to do the first 2 quest echoes for it. And then when you complete the final quest echo for that monolith, you receive a choice of blessings. Blessings are passive buffs that help you out in some way, whether that is from helping you to equip your character by, for example, making two-handed axes more likely to drop if you're playing a build which would use one of these, or by offering direct character power such as a health buff, armor buff, or specific kind of damage buff. You can get 1 blessing from each monolith, and they have a range of roles, so you can repeat the monolith's quest echoes for a stronger or a different blessing if you'd like. Each monolith has specific blessings that it can offer, and it will offer a choice of 3 each time you complete the monolith. As you're progressing through monoliths, you'll sometimes encounter echoes which increase the corruption of the monolith, which for standard monoliths, this increases the area level of the monolith, the rarity of items found, experience gained, and timeline stability gained in exchange for also giving the monsters a buff to health and damage based on how much corruption you acquire. There are also some echoes which reduce corruption by a bit if you increase it too much to where you can no longer handle the difficulty. After you've completed all 10 monoliths at least once, you can go to this area, and a small cutscene will play which will unlock empowered monoliths. This allows you to approach a monolith and enter the legendary version of it, which has a baseline corruption of 100 and a baseline monster level of also 100. This means that corruption no longer increases the monster level of the monolith, but instead increases the rarity of rewards that the echoes give, meaning you are able to access more of the more valuable echo rewards. The empowered monoliths probably provide quite a difficulty spike, as you're probably going from low double-digit corruption level 90-ish monsters to 3-digit corruption level 100 monsters. So you may have to continue farming normal monoliths for a little while if your build isn't super strong at the moment that you complete all of the monoliths for the first time. Blessings are permanent buffs that apply throughout the entire game, not just in the monoliths that you acquire them in. This means that they also work in other content such as the arena, which will be covered later in this video. Empowered monoliths give you an additional choice for a blessing at the end, and they are also grand blessings which provide higher values of the buffs compared to normal blessings, usually around 50% stronger I believe. Inside of empowered monoliths, you still have access to the quest echoes, however you can skip the first 2 and just go straight to the final one when you have enough timeline stability, allowing you to fight the boss for that monolith and receive your loot and a choice of blessing. When you defeat the main boss for that monolith inside of empowered monoliths, you also gain a stack of Gaze of Ouroboros, which grant additional corruption when you beat an echo, which would normally increase the corruption of your monolith. These buffs are single use, but they do stack up, so you can get a huge increase in corruption if you stack a lot of these up. The basics of echoes and monoliths have been covered, but there are some more in-depth mechanics, such as certain monoliths having exclusive rewards from some echoes inside that monolith, such as the Blood, Frost and Death monolith has exclusive body armor rewards. Normal monoliths have a maximum corruption of 50, while empowered monoliths have no maximum corruption. It is only gated by the strength of your character and the time required to progress. The higher the corruption of a monolith you have, the further away from the start that the encounters that increase the corruption will spawn, and more of the echoes that reduce corruption will start to spawn. This means you will gradually have to complete more and more echoes to get the same increase in corruption, slowing your progression down. There are also special echo encounters that sometimes offer interesting changes to a monolith. For example, you can get echoes that reroll the rewards on all uncompleted echoes to potentially change them into something more desirable. There is also another special echo that resets all completed echoes inside that monolith so you can get their reward again. Using these combined mechanics, you could actually create a farming monolith and not focus on increasing corruption so much, as that will reset your monolith. For example, for my current build, I need a specific set helmet, so I could farm the Black Sun monolith and attempt to get as many echoes as I can to have the set helmet reward, and farm this echo path until I acquire the helmet that I am target farming. While monoliths are definitely the core part of the Last Epoch endgame, at least for the moment, they are not the only endgame activity you can do, as there are also some other options such as dungeons and the arena. The arena is an activity that you need a key to be able to partake in, either an arena key or an arena key of memory. The standard arena mode has 40 waves of enemies that come, with a break every 5 waves and switching to a different area every 10 waves. There is also a final champion boss after the final 40th wave. The arena has 5 options, the first with monster level 50 with no set bonus rewards from the boss, the second with monster level 70 with a bonus reward of glyphs, the third with monster level 90 with a bonus reward of runes, and the fourth being a monster level 100 with a bonus reward of idols. And finally, where the monster level scales up to 100 over the first 80 rounds in the endless mode. A normal arena key will always start you at wave 1 on endless, while an arena key of memory will start at half the wave number you got to on your previous endless attempt, rounded to the nearest 10, but with a minimum of 100. Endless Arena even has a leaderboard for the top characters that have went through the highest amount of waves, so it could make for a nice little personal challenge to try and get onto the leaderboard. The dungeons in Last Epoch are areas that require a key to access. They each have 4 different levels of difficulty, which have bonus rewards for the more difficult ones, having higher monster level of up to 100 and also percent increases to monster health and damage. These keys can be found randomly from killing monsters and are somewhat common, and if you're spamming echoes you will quickly have quite a few attempts at the dungeons. Lightless Arbor is the lowest level dungeon, starting at monster level 20, with other tiers at monster level 65, 88, and 100. It is accessible from the Lightless Arbor area in the Ruined era, in this branch off from the surface. All except the lowest level have bonus rewards which are visible here. Soulfire Bastion is the middle level dungeon, starting at monster level 45, with other tiers at monster level 75, 92, and 100. It is accessible from the Felled Wood area in the Imperial era, in this branch off from the Risen Lake. The additional rewards for Soulfire Bastion are improvements to the Soul Gambler's inventory inside the dungeon, which is a unique mechanic inside of the dungeon. Temporal Sanctum is the highest level dungeon, starting at monster level 55, with other tiers at monster level 80, 95, and 100. It is accessible from the Ruined Coast in the Ruined era. The additional rewards for Temporal Sanctum are various types of additional items from the dungeon boss, and also improvements to the Eternity Cache, which, while I won't cover it in this video, it is used for crafting legendaries, a high tier method of improving items in the endgame. Recently has been my first real dive into the endgame of Last Epoch, and overall I think so far it has a really solid base, and while I do think that it might become somewhat repetitive after a while, this is a great foundation for the devs to add more to. I believe their plan is to do something similar to Path of Exile with leagues or seasons to add more mechanics, but I read that they do want to rotate them out more consistently than Path of Exile does, so rather than just adding more and more mechanics until eventually their endgame is bloated, they'll remove mechanics which they don't think stand up or are just outdated at that point. I think given more time, the endgame of Last Epoch will be something to rival the endgame of Path of Exile, which I think is a very strong compliment given the massive budget difference between the two, and also the significantly higher development time that Path of Exile has had. I think the future of Last Epoch is quite bright, as the devs have proven quite competent and passionate about their game so far, and if you haven't already bought Last Epoch, I would recommend keeping an eye out, as it is looking like a promising addition to any ARPG fan's library. If you've made it this far into the video, thanks for watching. I would appreciate any likes or feedback in the comments a lot, and this channel is probably going to be focusing harder on ARPGs and Last Epoch in the future, so if that's something you'd be interested in, maybe consider subscribing. See you around.